What is going on, everybody? Tom Kowalski at Pick and Fights Tom here for OTH MMA, talking about UFC Austin. We got Josh Emmett versus Calvin Kattar. We got the return of Donald Cerrone and what's probably going to be his last fight, taking on Joe Lauzon. We have Kevin Holland, Batman, Black Man, whatever you want to call him, the Trailblazer, Big Mouth. We have a ton of really, really fun fights on this card, and I am coming to you solo dolo today to talk a little bit about the fights that are happening tomorrow and give you some last minute insight, knowledge, whatever you want to know. Go ahead and fire off some comments in the comment box. Let me know what you want to talk about. If there's anything specific that you want to see here or otherwise know, make sure you subscribe to the channel, Overtime Heroics MMA on YouTube. Make sure you check us out, OT Heroics MMA on Twitter, for all of the latest news. We just posted a fight with, or an interview with Sam Hewitt from Cage Steel. We got a companionship with Glory going on as well. Some interesting news out of Glory. We just saw that they actually released all of their Russian fighters. They said due to difficulties with scheduling, visas, payment, all of that, challenging stuff with the Russia-Ukraine war still going on right now. But more developments on that. But let's get back to the UFC Austin. Calvin Kattar and Josh Emmett leading the top of the card. We have Donald Cerrone and Joe Lauzon. Tim Means and Kevin Holland right before that. The main card, it's a 6-fight main card, starting at the bottom. Julian Marquez versus Gregory Robocop Rodriguez. And I know a lot of people were interested in Julian Marquez coming into this fight. I know that he's had a couple big wins lately. Some of those wins haven't aged well. Actually, a lot of them haven't aged well, but his post-fight interviews is what really did him his popularity that he's seen lately. Asking Miley Cyrus to be his Valentine, she actually said yes, asking him to carve her name into his chest hair, and then he one-upped her, which is what a lot of people say was his fault. One-upped her by asking her to get a henna of his name on her belly, which I mean, I think that probably was asking a lot at the time. But Julian Marquez, he's a guy who goes in there, he likes to brawl, he's got a really strong ground and pound game and strong submissions. He is a strong submission attempts once he hurts somebody. He is a very thick guy. He's going to be the shorter fighter coming into this one. And a lot of people think Gregory Rodriguez, Robocop, looks a little older. He does look old, but I think he's going to be about 32, probably the younger fighter coming into this fight. He's going to have a little bit of a reach advantage here, but I think ultimately he is going to have an advantage wherever this fight is. I think he is the much more technical and skilled striker. We've seen him go and outstrike people on the feet. Also, in his off time, he will go and he'll compete in jiu-jitsu matches alone. So I think he's a world accomplished grappler in his own right. So I think Julian Marquez is going to have some difficulty if he tries to bring it to the floor unprompted, without setting it up properly or without waiting for his proper opportunity. I think he's going to have a real issue if he tries to force the fight to the floor. And then if he's going to keep it standing, I think Robocop is going to be able to piece him up on the feet kind of at will. I don't know if he's going to be able to finish Julian Marquez. We haven't seen Julian Marquez get finished in quite some time. He is an up-and-coming fighter. But looking at Tapology, they have Robocop rated just a little bit below him. And, that split decision loss against Armen Petrosyan in his last fight 3 months ago could be leading towards that. But if you actually watch the fight and you look back, Armen Petrosyan looked like the fighter who had lost that fight if you're purely just going on looks and aesthetics. Julian Marquez, submitted Sam Alvey, who Sam Alvey is kind of a guy who is in the UFC still fighting based on his own morals here. I don't really know if he doesn't have much title aspirations left. And at this point, I think he is just more or less a gatekeeper for the division. Before that, he's got a submission win over Maki Pitolo. Maki Pitolo, we've seen as a guy kind of not have the rise to success that he wanted to. Anaconda choke submission there. He had the loss to Alicio DiCirio via split decision. All that being said, with Robocop being the younger guy, being the taller guy, being the longer guy, being very well accomplished on the ground, we've seen Julian Marquez have some struggle against guys who have a ground game to boot, and I think Robocop is going to have the better, more accomplished, more technical stand-up. So I'm going with Gregory Rodriguez to win this fight over Julian Marquez to open up the main card. And as I say that, Cooper Burke joins us today. Cooper, how you doing so far? And we talked about Julian Marquez and Greg Rodriguez. No, was that? Okay. Well, I'll let him figure that out. Hopefully, everyone can hear me. While Cooper figures that out, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next fight here. Damir Ismagulov versus Guram Kuta Ladidze. Guram Kuta Ladidze, his claim to fame so far has been that he is a training partner of Khamzat Chimaev. He is a Georgian fighter, and I just have this thing where I don't typically like to bet against Georgian fighters. They typically bite me in the ass. And we've seen the rise to stardom lately with these Georgian fighters. And, Guram Kuta Ladidze is a really interesting combination. He is really, really strong on the feet, has a lot of power. He's very long on the ground. He's a submission expert, but he's one of those guys, kind of like Tony Ferguson, who likes to be active off of their back. We saw in his last fight against a guy who is going to be headlining a card next week in Mateusz Gamrot. Guram Kuta Ladidze was able to hand Mateusz Gamrot his first loss of his career in his first UFC fight. It was a really interesting fight. Guram was able to stay active off of his back, going for leg locks and knee bars when taken down. But I think ultimately he has a really, really intriguing stand-up approach. And when you look at Damir Ismagulov, he's been a guy who's been really, really effective at using his grappling to win fights and gain position on the ground, but he's also had some really strong Muay Thai as well. So this is a really intriguing fight. Let's check back with Cooper and see how he's doing.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, like you were saying, I was pretty high on Ismagulov here, but I think it really is going to go the other way. If you beat a guy that's fighting in a main event, I think that bodes well for your career. And like you said, he's really kind of good everywhere. He's got power, but he's not technically super sound. But it's enough to kind of cover the gap of his striking, and his grappling, of course, is just fantastic. He's pretty offensive, like you said, and I think that's going to be the key to this fight because both of these men are pretty offensive grapplers. One in wrestling and the other one in Muay Thai and clinch kind of thing. So I think, whoever can use their grappling to advance positions the most and do significant damage rather than just win on the feet is going to win the fight. I don't think it's going to stay on the feet very long, but I could be completely far off. That being said, if I had to pick a winner, I don't know. This is pretty close to a toss-up for me.
Yeah, it is a really, really close fight. We've seen a lot of Damir inside the UFC, and he's more of the grappling wrestling specialist, whereas Guram, I would say, leans a little bit more heavy into the Brazilian jiu-jitsu side of things and the submission grappling. I think, you said if it goes to the ground, it's going to be whoever is going to be able to have the most advantage there. I don't see Guram being able to have a big advantage on the ground. If anything, I think Damir is going to take him down and try to control him. But at the same time, Guram is really, really big for the division. And I don't see him being taken down and being controlled for any long, extended period of time. And I think he's also the more creative striker, too. Damir being more of a volume guy, Guram having the power end. On my show, Pickin' Fights, we did it earlier in the week. Make sure you go and check out Pickin' Fights. YouTube channel is Pickin' Winners. Go and give us a subscription. Not subscription, but go subscribe to the channel. Go and, take a look and let us know what you think. But I think so far, it's been about 5 days since I made that prediction of going with Guram. And at this point, nothing has swayed me in the other direction of going with Damir. I think it is going to be a very, very close fight. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Guram, who's has the craziness of training with Khamzat Chimaev. I know he hasn't fought in about a year and a half or 2 years due to some visa issues and some injury issues. But like I said on my other show, I think that if there's anybody who you're going to train with that's going to be able to get you past some of that potential ring rust or get you past some of those injuries and time off, I think it's going to be the maniac Khamzat Chimaev. So I'm not feeling super confident about Guram, but if he can come in here and he knocks off Mateusz Gamrot and he knocks off Damir Ismagulov, in his first 2 UFC fights, we're going to be a real interesting rise for Guram Kuta Ladidze. What say you, Cooper?
Yeah, that's a good point. I've always kind of seen ring rust as something more mental than physical, but especially if you're training with a guy like Hamza Chimaev. He seems like a guy that doesn't take any days off. So I think that ring rust is really going to be a minimal factor here, just because of how Chimaev trains. He's training like it's a fight. So I think there was a lot of full contact sparring in this camp. So I think he's going to be super mentally sharp. Now we will see if he makes any decisions like certain decisions on the ground, because you said he's so offensive, grappling heavy, that could cost him, with Damir Ismagulov being so good on the wrestling side. I don't see him slipping up like that. So that's why, like you said, I would lean towards him. But then again, Damir Ismagulov he's been on the edge of a significant breakthrough in the division for so long, and I think now might be the time.
It's going to be interesting. Like you said, Damir's been being able to control and has gotten a lot of victories by using his ground game and his control. But he doesn't have a ton of finishes as of late. Guram is the finisher in this fight. So it's going to be really, really interesting. Is Guram going to be able to finish the surging and unfinishable decision machine in Damir Ismagulov? Or, is Damir going to have his way with Guram like he does everybody else? Either way, I think it's going to be a very interesting fight. Speaking of interesting fights with a lot of things swirling around it, Albert Duraya versus Yoko and Buckley. Yoko and Buckley, of course, known by everybody as the guy with that amazing ninja spinning back kick knockout of Impa Kasagani about a year to 2 years ago now. That is a knockout that will live in UFC fame for a long time. I'm not sure if they're going to put. I know they put fighters in the Hall of Fame. I know they put fights in the Hall of Fame. I'm not sure if they're going to put KOs in the Hall of Fame, but if they do, this is a surefire Hall of Famer. Yoko and Buckley, though, really interesting combination of fights and skill sets. He just had a fight against a guy who I am going to butcher his name. I'm going to attempt it anyway. It's Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Actually, not that bad. Now that I said it out loud. But Abdul Razak Al Hassan is a guy who's well-versed in a lot of different areas. Yoko and Buckley, we were a little concerned. We weren't sure about his grappling ability. And it turned out that, he was able to go fight Abdul Razak Al Hassan, have that fight go to the ground. And, he was able to hold his own, and he ended up getting the win, too. So I like Abdul Razak Al Hassan's overall ability, and I like how Yoko and Buckley was able to fight the fight that was presented to him and come out victorious because of it. Albert Duraev is another guy who's really grappling heavy. He didn't show me a lot of things to be super confident about against his first UFC fight against Roman Kopylov. The first fight, actually, they spent the entire first round on the feet. And then after that, came out in the second round. Albert Duraev got knocked down. I was like, okay, maybe I should grapple this guy. Grappled his way to I think it was a split decision. Either way, Yoko and Buckley, I think, has a strong enough ground game to not necessarily let Albert Duraev have his way with him. And if Duraev comes into this and tries to strike with Yoko and Buckley, it's going to be a problem. Yoko and Buckley, in his pre-fight interview, he was saying that, or somebody had posed the proposition to him that Albert Duraev was going to come in and try to wrestle and try to stand up with him through the whole fight, which brought Yoko and Buckley to an hysterical laugh. And he just said, no, this guy's going to come in. If he knows what's good for him, he's going to come in, he's going to wrestle me. And Yoko and Buckley seemed really, really confident about his wrestling ability compared to Albert Duraev. Roman Kopylov, I'm not totally sold on him and his ability, and the fact that Albert Duraev went to a decision with him, and it was actually pretty close, got knocked down, like I said. I'm not sold on Albert Duraev either. A lot of people are picking him, and I think that makes Yoko and Buckley a good underdog pick right now. What do you think, Cooper?
Yeah, I was pretty high on Buckley after that knockout, as we all were. I mean, I think he followed it up with a knockout of the guy known as the Beverly Hills Ninja. So, I think he's been on quite a tear lately. He did have a knockout loss to Alessio Di Chirico. But then he reeled off 2 more wins. Antonio Arroyo was a knockout, and then a split decision win against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, who's a solid fighter in my opinion. Albert Duraev, on the other hand, I haven't seen enough from him to be like, oh, this guy really jumps off the page to me. as a guy that like I'm really high on. That being said, he picked up his win in his debut. He won the Contender Series, so he's on a 10-fight win streak. But the jump from Roman Kopylov to Joaquin Buckley is a pretty big one. I think Buckley with another statement win could be on the door of the top 15, maybe around the 20-25 range if he picks up another win here. So he's a solid fighter. I think that's a lot to ask of a guy in his second fight in the UFC. So I think that's going to be too much for him. I think Buckley's smart on his feet. I think he learned a lot from his knockout loss to Alessio Di Chirico. So that was a pretty violent one. I think Buckley was out cold. So, I think Buckley is going to move forward, and I think that if this fight stays on the feet, it's his to lose. And again, I think he's just going to be too much for Albert Duraev.
Yeah, like you said, Yoko and Buckley is a big dude. It's impressive that he's able to make 185. He's going to have a 1-inch reach advantage. I think even a 1-inch height advantage as well, which is a much different build than Roman Kopylov, a guy that Albert Duraev had faced previously. And with the UFC experience, I like Yoko and Buckley here, and a lot of people don't. He is an underdog. Tapology is not picking him, but being the younger fighter with more UFC experience, and not a half bad grappling game against a guy who we know against maybe his better judgment or better game plan is going to stand and strike. I'm going to go with Yoko and Buckley to get this one done. Moving up the card, and now we get into the really, really interesting fights. The ones with all the big names. We have UFC veteran and legend Tim Means against real-life legend and superhero Kevin Big Mouth, Trailblazer, Black Man, Superman, Batman. Probably has one of the most wide range of repertoires of nicknames in the entire UFC. I think I'm going with Kevin Holland here. I mean, I just can't pick against the guy. He's looked incredible in his one fight at 175 pounds against Alex Cowboy Oliveira. He was able to, even on the ground, look more offensive when he's on the ground. Some people will accept positions, but in UFC, I know that a lot of times judges will seemingly judge on control, but the way the rules are written, it is damage first. And Kevin Holland is the guy who knocked out Jacare Souza off his back. He is just like, insert favorite aggressive fighter in less than dominant position here. Tony Ferguson, people with slashing elbows who, if you take them down, great. Now you have a different problem where they're going to try and cut you up and beat you from their back. That's Kevin Holland. He's submitted guys from his back. He has a really, really good, and I know Joe Rogan and plenty of people rave about Kevin Holland's jiu-jitsu ability. Travis Lutter is his coach, and Travis Lutter goes on and on about Kevin Holland. And I think he was on the Joe Rogan Experience a year and a half ago or something, and Travis Lutter was just saying, like, if we could get this guy to focus and get on a diet plan, and he would be untouchable. And, we've seen Kevin Holland. He's moved down to 175 now. He says that that's just because, where the fights are. He would love to be at 185, eat whatever he wants, show up and weigh in and have a good time. But now that he's gotten with the UFC PI and he's as a nutritionist and he's focusing on his food and becoming a professional athlete in his own words, I really think sky's the limit for Kevin Holland. I mean, he's exciting on the feet. He's knocked people out. He's knocked out the guy that we were just talking about in Yoko and Buckley. He actually goes, hey, you have a booger in your nose, and then knocked him out. So he has the personality to be a star, and I think that's why the UFC is pushing him here. He has the stand-up and the knockout ability to be a star, and he's really, really good with offensive submissions on the ground as well. His only weakness is going to be that wrestling, but I don't think it's going to be as big of a weakness in this lesser weight class. I mean, again, he's going to be really, really long for the division. So and I know Tim Means, he's an intelligent fighter. He's got a ton of UFC experience, but I just don't think at the advanced age that Tim Means is at, he's got good boxing, but I think Kevin Holland has better stand-up. And I think Kevin Holland is aggressive on the ground, and I'm thinking Kevin Holland all the way. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Kevin Holland here. I think Tim Means is kind of slow, or at least slowing down in terms of his age. I think Kevin Holland's going to look to capitalize on that. He's always been a fighter that's been big on momentum swings and take advantage of the little moments that Tim Means might leave open. He did it against Jacare Souza off his back. He did it to Joaquin Buckley. So I think if Kevin Holland is committed now to this diet, to this workout plan, I think he can go pretty far. I don't want to say this is a huge test for him. This could be maybe more than he bargained for, just given how veterans perform in the UFC. But I think it's really his fight here. And he's had a pretty long list of names that he's fought. He's fought John Phillips, he's fought GM3, but he actually fought Thiago Santos in his UFC debut. So now they're removed from 205 pounds and he's back at 170 pounds, where he's going to be a lot longer, a lot leaner, maybe a little bit faster, just because of that reach advantage and what he brings to the table. I don't see him losing this fight. The only way he could really lose is if he gets out-grappled, and I think that I've heard from not only Travis Lutter, but a lot of people around him that he's been working his tail off in the gym. So if that holds true, I really think it's his fight to lose. It could either be a finish, maybe in the second round by knockout, clean off the feet, or if he chooses to grapple, I say it goes all 3 rounds. But either way, I see Kevin Holland winning this one.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about veterans and the way veterans like to fight in the UFC. Speaking of veterans, we have probably one of the best known veterans, probably making his final appearance inside the UFC octagon. I know a lot of people are hoping it's his final appearance inside an octagon, period, because of the damage that this guy has taken. Donald Cowboy Cerrone taking on Joe Lauzon. Joe Lauzon hasn't been in the UFC or in an octagon for, I think, 2 or 3 years at this point. Has a ton of performance bonuses over the years of his own. I know I went first for the first few fights here. Cooper, I'm going to pass it to you. Give us your first thoughts and what your predictions are for Cerrone versus Lauzon.
Man, this is a tough one to pick. Both these guys are legends. Both these guys have been around forever. But I'm going to have to go with Cowboy Cerrone. I think that Joe Lauzon's ring rust is going to be a lot to deal with. His last fight was almost 3 years ago in October of 2019. And before that, he dropped 3 fights in a row to names that are not very impressive. Stevie Ray, Clay Guida, and Chris Grutzmacher. So I think that the only one that's still in the promotion is Grutzmacher. And he just lost to Claudio Puelles. So Joe Lauzon's been on the downhill for a while. This should be his last fight in the promotion. But if we're looking at it from a skills standpoint, you can't go wrong with Cowboy Cerrone. He's finally got a guy that matches up with him speed-wise. Both these guys are wily and smart, so we're going to see a lot of feints, a lot of very technical, heady fighting, if you will. But I think it's Cowboy Cerrone's to lose. He's dangerous everywhere he goes. I'm pretty sure he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's got finishes galore on the feet, and he's just a gamer, man. I can't pick against him. I think the last time I picked against him truly was Conor McGregor, which made sense because that was kind of right at the end of his prime was the last McGregor fight. So I think, it'll be a perfect fight for Cerrone to go right off into the sunset and maybe picks up a late finish. But I think Lauzon's going to start off strong, as a lot of these guys do. They start off strong and their cardio kind of fades. So I think Cerrone's going to have that problem, though. I think he's going to stay consistent all 3 rounds. He's going to be able to maintain the same pace. But as Joe Lauzon drops off, look for a late finish from Cowboy Cerrone.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think the interesting things about this that feed into it for me are the fact that Joe Lauzon has been outside of the UFC and really outside of MMA for 3 years. And now I know he runs a gym, but running a gym and training for a fight are very different, especially when you're maybe not expecting to have another fight. I mean, only Joe Lauzon knows this, but for all intents and purposes, he could have been, in his mind, retired and then got the call about Cowboy Cerrone and, had to snap it back on. At the end of the day, these guys both have a lot of finish and performance bonuses. Finish, that's not a word. They have a lot of performance and finish bonuses throughout their career. But going into this fight, they both are committed to getting those bonuses again. So they're committed to fighting for the fans and putting on a show. And I expect nothing less from either of these two guys. But with that being said, you have Cerrone, who has been fighting, granted, not his best fights of his career, but he's also been competing in jiu-jitsu outside, in combat jiu-jitsu. He's been in the octagon fighting against people like Conor McGregor. Granted, he hasn't looked great as of late, but he's also been facing pretty good competition. I mean, I think it was Andre Muniz who he fought recently, and it was Alex Moreno who stepped in on short notice. They were supposed to be fighting at 155. They moved it to, I think, either 65 or 70. Moreno's a big dude and was able to finish him after Cerrone will never say no to a fight. He only says no to locations or times. He never says no to the guy. In that case, he probably should have said no after having his fight fall out. He had a really interesting, good fight against Nico Price. Now, I know Nico Price hasn't quite had the trajectory that we had hoped, but still a really, really good, interesting fight. A lot of love and a lot of hardcore punches and just hardcore mentality being exchanged between those two guys. It was like watching an older Nico Price and a younger Nico Price, or an older Cowboy Cerrone and a younger Cowboy Cerrone. And then you go back, the loss before that is Anthony Pettis, which – Sergio Pettis is doing his thing over in, I believe it's the PFL right now. And then he has his loss to Conor McGregor, right? And then he has a loss to Justin Gaethje. So it's not like these are like terrible losses against people who shouldn't be in the UFC. I like Cowboy Cerrone. I think he's going to go into this. He talked a lot about fighting in front of his son, Danger, and the emotion behind that. I really do think that Cowboy's going to come out motivated. Sometimes, there's two types of Cowboy. There's Cowboy who, before the fight, he's ready to go in there and he puts out a good performance, aka Nico Price Cerrone, or there's Cerrone who doesn't want to be there and he goes out and it's not enjoyable to watch. Alex Moreno Cerrone. I think we're gonna get Nico Price Cerrone. I think we're gonna get the Cowboy Cerrone that we're potentially used to, but maybe a little bit older. These two guys, Joe Lauzon and Donald Cerrone, are going to go out there, put on a show. I think the UFC wants to give Cerrone a very winnable fight, a fight that he can go on there and make a great performance for the fans for. And I think this is how, like you said, Donald Cerrone goes and rides off into the sunset. With that being said, go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't agree with you more. Cerrone's a tough guy. I think if he knows this is a retirement fight, he's going to leave it all out there, kind of go out on a shield, as they say. So I don't expect to see another one of those standing TKOs like we saw against Alex Moreno. I think this fight's going to go to the finish either way. But I am going to have to go with Cerrone here.
And I love Donald Cerrone. He's wearing in his Tapology picture, he's wearing a cowboy hat, but it's a tap-out cowboy hat. I mean, if there's anything that says Donald Cerrone more than a tap-out cowboy hat, I haven't seen it. So if you can think of anything in the comments, let us know. That brings us to our sixth and final fight on the card, Calvin Kattar versus surging prospect Josh Emmett. This is a really, really intriguing fight here. Calvin Kattar is going to be the taller guy. He's known for his crisp stand-up and boxing and also really, really good takedown defense. 34 years old. He's coming in 5'11", 72-inch reach. Against Josh Emmett, a little bit older, aging in his career, 37 years old, 5'6", 70-inch reach here. Josh Emmett known for having really good grappling, but he's one of those guys who has really good grappling and wrestling, and then he comes into the UFC, realizes that he really likes knocking people out, and that's become the base for all of the rest of his MMA. He's extremely quick. He has a really, really powerful left hand. He knocks people out with hooks, with straights. I'm really interested to see Josh Emmett and what he can do against Calvin Kattar, but Calvin Kattar has only really looked bad a handful of times, and those are against the top quality competition. I mean, he got a decision loss against Zabit Magomedsharipov, which, we saw the sky was the limit for Zabit Magomedsharipov. And I'm a little upset because A, we won't get to see him anymore, and B, because I've mastered his last name and now I don't have to say it for any particular reason. So I'm just going to say Zabit Magomedsharipov a couple more times just to get in all of the times I wouldn't have said it otherwise. But Calvin Kattar, beat Jeremy Stevens. Okay, that's not a big one. Beat Dan Ige. Never a small feat. He had the loss to Max Holloway, and then he came back 5 months ago against Giga Chikadze and looked probably the best he ever had. Was able to get Giga to the ground, tire him out, And then Giga wasn't the same after the second and third round where it was on the ground. And Calvin Kattar was able to use his boxing and just beat him up. I don't think Calvin Kattar is going to be able to get Josh Emmett to the ground and hold him there and tire him out in the same way. But on the other side of the coin, I do believe this is the first 5-round fight that Josh Emmett has fought. So it's going to be interesting to see the 37-year-old in the fourth, in the fifth round against someone who's been there before. Calvin Kattar with a really, really slick boxing with a great footwork. He's not he's like I said, he's good on the ground in his own right. Now, Josh Emmett, I think, is going to be the stronger guy, like physically. But I think giving up that reach, giving up some of that height, and allowing Calvin Kattar to kind of move and slip and get away from him could be Calvin's secret to success, especially as the fight goes on. But I expect Josh Emmett to have some success early. What do you think, Cooper?
Yeah, that's pretty much how I would put it. Obviously Cater's got a lot of good wins, but I've never been super impressed with him as a fighter. But then again, you can't really argue with a Dan Ige win and a Giga Chikadze win. So, I think he's better than I give him credit for. But that being said, Josh Emmett looks solid. His only losses are to Jeremy Stevens and Des Green in the UFC. And he's been in the promotion for a while, probably 6-7 years. I think it's his time to shine. He's kind of on the end of his prime, and a lot of the lighter guys, smaller guys, peak a little bit earlier. So maybe 37 is a little late. But I've been impressed with what I saw. I think he fought really well against Shane Burgos. That fight was crazy. But obviously he fought great against Dan Ige, picking up the decision win. And he's a sharp fighter. He's got great grappling, but he's also has a stand-up game that's good enough to where he can lean on it. I've seen him take out plenty of fighters with that big right hand that he has. And I think that could pose a problem for Calvin Kattar. Maybe not as a knockout, but I think, damage, as they say. If he can maybe box on the same level as Calvin Kattar, maybe not Max Holloway level like we saw, but if he can kind of hold his own boxing, I think the fight's his to win on the ground. And then, like you said, it all comes down to the fourth and fifth round. That's when the grappling is going to be biggest, because Calvin Kattar's got a great asset other than his chin. He has a lot of intangibles, but it's his chin and his cardio that really set him apart from everybody else. I think that's going to be really huge in this fight. Do you think Emmett can crack his cardio, maybe get him a little bit more tired? And if he can, and if he can use that grappling that he has in the later rounds to maybe do some damage or maybe have control, that'll be his way to the win. I don't see him winning by finish. Now, on the other hand, Calvin Kattar, he's a stud, man. Like I said, I wasn't super high on him, but you can't really argue with the performances he's had. He's tough as they come. He's been doing it for a while. And, the fact that he made it to that title eliminator fight against Max Holloway, obviously he looked a step slower than him. But again, he didn't continue that form in his last fight. He looked really slow against Holloway. Then he came out and he had the best version of himself that we've ever seen against Giga Chikadze. So I think that if Calvin Kattar wants to strike, I think he's going to have to be careful of that right hand of Emmett. And he's maybe going to have to use a little bit of defensive wrestling because Emmett is known for a lot of takedowns, a lot of I don't want to say it's like bully grappling, but it's not like jiu-jitsu. It's more like raw strength kind of thing because Emmett's a big guy for the division in terms of muscle mass and size. So if I think Cater's going to have to be wary of that. I think he could put it away, but I've also never seen Josh Emmett knocked out cold. So I really think this fight could go either way. It's probably pretty close on the odds, by the odds makers at least. But I'm going to have to roll with Emmett. He's just got the hot hand. He's got 4 in a row against Michael Johnson, Mirsad Bektic, and Shane Burgos and Dan Ige, who are 4 pretty solid names. Obviously, Michael Johnson is not the fighter he once was. Neither is Bektic, but Burgos and Ige are at the top of the division. So Emmett's an impressive guy. I think he's going to get it done. If he doesn't finish it within 3, it's going to go to the decision. So I'm going to go with a third-round knockout or a decision. But I think if the fight does get to the later rounds, that's where we're going to see it. I think it's going to be close until the 4th or 5th round when either fighter starts to kind of wane.
Yeah, really interesting breakdown there. I know you said that we haven't seen Josh Emmett knocked out cold, but we have seen him finish before. And we've seen him finished by Jeremy Stevens, which I know it was in 2018, 2019. Not, still doesn't age super well. Jeremy Stevens obviously having to shave his beard and his hair in order to make weight over in the PFL. I think that just happened like this morning or yesterday. We have seen that, and we saw Calvin Kattar go out there and absolutely demolish and finish Jeremy Stevens, and then just another similar opponent or opponent that they both have is Shane Burgos, in which Shane Burgos, like you said, it was a good fight for Josh Emmett, went to decision. Well, Calvin Kattar finished Shane Burgos at the end of the third round. I think Calvin Kattar does have the ability to put people away. We've seen Josh Emmett get put away. He's been in some wars lately, notably Dan Ige, Shane Burgos, back and forth shots. Now, not to say that Calvin Kattar hasn't, but being a little bit younger, your body's going to recover a little bit better too. I think if Josh Emmett tries to grapple and muscle Calvin Kattar in this one, I just think that Calvin Kattar is going to be able to use that takedown defense to wear on Josh Emmett a little bit. And then as it gets to the fourth and the fifth round is really when Calvin Kattar starts to open things up. Now, Calvin Kattar absolutely can get hit. Don't get me wrong. Giga Chikadze, even in the fifth round, dead tired, was still landing some punches on Calvin Kattar. And, if Josh Emmett can land some of the same punches, we could see a very different fight. But I think that is more of a stretch here. When I just look at everything about the fighters, I think Josh Emmett is going to have a difficult time taking to the ground and then keeping on the ground Calvin Kattar. I think that is going to ultimately tire out Josh Emmett. I don't think he's going to have the same snap on his punches and his jab and then subsequently be able to open up and land that left hand. So I think all of it kind of feeds into each other here. And I think Calvin Kattar is just going to be wise to the game plan of Josh Emmett. Stop the takedown and then avoid the left hand and stay out of range. Pop in, slip, get out of range. So I think, Josh Emmett not being a boxer first, but something that he's adopted, I think that was ultimately going to be his downfall here. And, like our boy Shane, who's tuning in. Shane, thanks so much. Got to ride with my guy Calvin Kattar on this one. I don't believe he makes it look easy, though. I agree with him 100%. I think it's going to be a very close fight, but I think the longer it goes on, the more likely it is to swing into Calvin Kattar's. And I'm actually going to take this one to go to decision if you have to, if you make me pick. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of like what you said about that main event fight. But I really think it's going to be a huge litmus test for the future of the division, at least, because both these guys are kind of on the back end of their primes. So a win is either going to put them towards the title shot or kind of shunt them away into the gatekeeper territory. I don't really want to call people gatekeepers, but I think that's ultimately what the loser of this fight is going to become. However, for the winner, I think the sky's the limit. We've got kind of a logjam up there with Volkanovski and Holloway, Ortega. I haven't seen Yair Rodriguez fight. I don't know if is he still having USADA issues or is he back in there?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything about him get scheduled lately, no.
Yeah, so there's a couple of guys up there that are in the mix for the title. But a win here will really throw their name in the hat as another name for Volkanovski to look out for. I think TKZ is done fighting for the title, unfortunately. So maybe they could take their place at around 3 or 4 in the rankings. So this is a really big fight for the division, I think. And that's good because there aren't a lot of fights on this card that have a lot of weight. Maybe a couple with Damir Gulov, as you said, guys that have bright futures but don't really have like that gateway to immediately bust closer to the rankings like they do here.
Absolutely. I hear everything you're saying. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in and for watching. If you made it to the end of the video, go ahead and throw us a like. Comment down below what you think, what your bets are, what your feelings are going into the weekend, and drop us a subscribe if you can. We really appreciate it. It does a lot for the channel. Cooper, thank you again for joining me and going through this main card fight. You can follow us on Twitter. They are right here, at Pickin' Fights Tom, at Cooper Burke 9. OTH MMA is the YouTube channel. OT Heroics MMA is the Twitter. Make sure you're going and checking us out. Go to overtimeheroics.net to get all of your information for fighter interviews, breakdowns of upcoming fights, breakdowns and analysis of fights that had just happened from all over the MMA world, not just specific to UFC. If you are a big UFC person, make sure you check out my other YouTube channel, Pickin' Winners. On that, we have a show that's called Pickin' Fights. We released in the early part of the week, betting and analysis breakdowns of all the fights. And make sure you go into, like I said, overtimeheroics.net. Cooper's doing a ton of great interviews. I believe he just dropped one today with Cage Steel fighter Sam Hewitt. Previously a bodybuilder, now into MMA. They go all into that. Make sure you give that one a like and check it out. Other than that, can't wait for the fights, and we'll see you guys next time.